Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me? If you can chat. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Yes.
There's enough mute buttons that we have to hit to get started on this thing. So, all right. So we're all good. So thanks everybody for joining. We're going to be going over reports that you may or may not know about for employee funding today. I am Jackie Tretchell with the Connect Carolina Change Management team.
I am Chris Minter. I am also with the Connect Carolina Change Management team.
I'm Robin Burke, and I'm with the Finance VA team.
I'm Chris Lawless. I'm with the Commitment Accounting Group in Finance.
I'm Crystal Jackson. I'm with Finance Commitment Accounting as well.
And so the way it's going to work today is Chris Minter and I are going to present, and we have the fabulous Robin, Chris, and Crystal on hand to answer all the tough questions. So we will be taking questions as we go through.
And a little bit about our webinar format. So I can see a lot of names I recognize, so not all of you are newbies to this. But if you are, the way the webinar typically works, like Jackie was saying, we're going to present. And as we go, if you have some questions that are sort of on your mind, you don't have to wait to ask them. You can actually type them into the chat box that many of you have already found. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep track of everyone's asking their questions. We're going to answer them in the order that they came in. And we're going to try to stop periodically throughout the webinar so we don't get so far down that you forgot what you were even talking about. So we will stop and answer your questions, so just please wait for us to make those stops. We're also trying to keep you a little bit awake. We're going to ask you some questions throughout the webinar, and we're going to do it via a polling question feature. So when we get to the questions, I'll show you the question, we'll read off the answers, and then it'll pop up on the screen, and you'll be able to choose like a radio button to see what answer you want to put in. Finally, hopefully everyone is hearing us okay and can see everything and can watch the whole webinar, but just in case, we always do record these webinars, and we're going to post those to CC Info. And usually it takes like a day or so to get out there. So if you check on CC Info 5 minutes after our webinar, you probably won't find it, but by the end of today or by tomorrow morning, you should be able to see it. You'll be able to watch the thing in its entirety. Okay. So the main topics that we're going to talk about today, you can see in the big 1, 2, 3. We're going to talk about how the payroll funding process works, where in the process the reports pull the information from, and 3, when it's helpful to use each report. Because we're going to go over about 8 reports, and sometimes they have sort of similar names, or you can't quite tell which is going to be good in what place. So we're going to show you exactly where in the process each report's going to line up for you. Okay, also, you see like a little QRC here, we call it the quick reference card. That's actually up on CC Info, and we're going to go over this entire process. I know it's a little bit small to see right here, but we're going to break that down. But this is generally what we're going to cover in the webinar. That is the process, and it's also listing the reports that go with the pieces in the process. Jackie?
And I've actually just put in the chat window the link to the reference card. If you leave this webinar and you forget to copy down the link or something, you can find it on CC Info. It's a little bit delayed in showing up on the search. So if you use the search box on CC Info, you might not find it for another day or so. But if you go to either the finance or HR tabs on CC Info and look under search resources, so search finance resources or search HR payroll resources, it's the top resource that's listed in both of those locations. But again, the link is in the chat window if you want to click on it and take a look at that and hang it up and print it off for everybody you know and wallpaper your office with it. That'd be awesome.
Laminate it. Whatever.
All right.
All right, so this is one of those polling questions I was talking about earlier, and we're going to start you off with a softball one because there is no right answer. You just have to answer how you feel. So we just want to kind of gauge how everyone is with this whole process. So we want to know, do you A, not know very much at all? You know a little bit, but you're kind of confused about the report names and not really sure which ones to do. You know enough to get the information you need, or you are a master, and but you just want to see if there's anything additional you might learn from this webinar. Here's the polling question. You guys are already on top of it.
And we'll share the percentage so we can see where we all are. Everybody should see the answers popping up. It looks like we're an even mix between I only know a little bit and I know enough to get the information I need.
Got a couple masters out there.
A couple.
To meet those masters.
All right, so we'll give it another second and then we'll close the poll. Looks like we got another master chiming in.
I like confidence.
All right. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that. So that's good. We have sort of an even mix of people and across the board in terms of knowledge. So we will try to make it so that everybody is a master by the end of today's session. But don't worry, I'm not going to ask you that again. Okay, before we get started, Patty just asked, where do we find the resource materials in CC Info? So if you go to CC Info on the blue navigation bar, and if you click either Finance or HR Payroll, and then on the drop-down menu, you'll see Search Finance Resources or Search HR Payroll Resources. And that reference card will be the first one in the list for both of those. Okay, so jumping in, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how the payroll funding process works. So the first thing, and this is sort of an outside of the process, you'll notice that there are a couple of boxes as we go that are outlined in green instead of blue, and that's partially because the process runs regardless of whether or not you do these steps. So they're outside, but they are important to feed into the process. So the first one would be that finance or HR staff could run the funding end date notification report. That's just a hint for what's coming up later. But to see what end dates are expiring. So for positions or appointments that have inactive chart field strings or charges that are going to go to suspense. So you would do that at the beginning of a pay period. So that you could make changes as necessary to keep those things from going to suspense. The second step after that, and so this is an after, but it's also really the first step in the process. So if somebody's hired or if you're changing salary information. So EPAR originators, so an EPAR originator is somebody who has access to submit an HR action into Connect Carolina. EPAR stands for Electronic Personnel Action Request. So the originator would submit the EPAR to add or change base or supplemental salary or to change funding sources. So if you're hiring somebody, you're going to be adding their salary. But if somebody is working on a grant, say, and they're working on one grant and they're moving to another grant and you need to change the funding sources, you would do that with an EPAR as well. So that's done at this stage. And what happens is Connect Carolina stores that information, and it stores it in two different places. So the funding information at the top is the chart field strings and the percentage of salary that's going to be charged to each of those chart field strings. At the bottom is the amount of the salary. Again, we're only talking about base and supplemental salary. Both of these storage places are located in the HR side of Connect Carolina, but they are stored separately. And we're going to talk a little bit about why they're stored separately as we go through. The next thing that happens is special pay gets added into the paychecks. Special pay is things like lump sum payments, overtime, those type of pay that's outside of the base and supplemental salary for employees. The next thing that happens, the thing we all love the best, is generate paychecks. So the system generates paychecks based on the salary amount. So this is the payroll process right here. And part of the reason that the funding information is separate from the salary amounts is we're getting paid as employees through this system. So it doesn't matter whether the funding sources have issues, that sort of thing, the paychecks are still getting generated. So that's why it's split beforehand. The next thing that happens, again, it's a green box popping up, is recalculating projections. For those of you that know a lot about salary projections or that attended the salary projections webinar in the spring, which you can find on CC Info if you didn't make it, you know that the salary projections are calculated every weeknight. They're updated every workday weeknight. But the reason they're in here is once paychecks are generated, projections have to be adjusted because they're no longer projections, it's an actual expense once that amount goes into a paycheck. So, again, that's an outside of the process, which is why it's green, but it does happen, and it's important to know that this is where there's a change that happens every night that the paychecks are generated. This is when a change happens to the projections. Then the next thing that happens is the funding information, the salary amounts get distributed to the chart field strings. So notice that's a separate step from generating the paychecks. And this is done in Connect Carolina after the paychecks are generated. And sometimes, even though you ran that funding end date notification report at the beginning, something happened and charges have to go to Suspense. So Suspense is sort of a holding account. And so what happens is after the amounts are distributed to the chart field strings, any charges that go to Suspense, those chart field strings are moved there. The final step is Connect Carolina records the payroll expenses in the GL Actuals ledger. So again, that's the book of record for the university's expenses. And so all of the expenses at that point are recorded in the ledger. And I said it's the final spot. So in an ideal world, it's the final spot. In reality, sometimes after it's been recorded, we have to make changes to the chart field strings. And that's where PAT transactions come in to play. And so PAT, you likely know, is Payroll Accounting Adjustment Tool. And so PAT transactions can make changes to the chart field strings that are used for payroll. Again, you're not changing the amount of the payroll expense. You can only change the funding sources. And so that then feeds automatically into the GL Actuals ledger. So in a nutshell, a very large nutshell, that's the payroll funding process. All right.
All right, we got a question for you here, so get your fingers ready. True or false? Connect Carolina stores the chart field strings and the percent to charge for base and supplemental salary separately from the base and supplemental salary amounts. You got a 50-50 chance.
All right, we got a bunch of people answering. I'm going to share the percentage of votes with everybody. All right. We'll give it another second or so if you want to make your vote with the radio button on the screen.
Looks like most of you are voting. That's good.
It looks like overwhelmingly everybody thinks true.
All right, want to call it?
All right, let's call it.
All right, it is indeed true. So if you guys true, that is great. If not, well, let's keep listening.
So just remember, the chart field strings and the percentage get stored separately from the salary amounts. And part of that reason is that the salary amounts, employees get paid regardless of what the chart field strings and the percentage are, what the breakdown is for that. All right.
Okay, another question for you. So now you have a 25% chance of getting this. When are the charges and paychecks distributed to the chart field strings? Is it A, after posting in the GL, B, before the paychecks are generated, C, after the paychecks are generated, or D, when the EPAR is submitted?
All right, and we'll put the poll up there.
And now go crazy and start answering.
I'll show the percentages here. Looks like a large number of people think it's after paychecks are generated.
Okay, a couple more seconds here. Still got people. All right, looks like we're kind of finishing this up. It is indeed C, after the paychecks are generated. So we talked about how people get paid regardless of what the deal is with the chart field strings. We kind of deal with that on the back end, so people aren't freaking out and missing their mortgage payments. So if you guessed C, that was correct.
All right, so let's stop real quick before we go on and see if there are any questions. I did see one come in to the question. Our names. Oh, that's an easy one. So I'm Jackie Treschel. I'm with the Connect Carolina Change Management Team.
I'm Chris Minter. I'm on the same group as Jackie.
And in the room, we also have Robin Burke, Chris Lawless, and Crystal Jackson from the Commitment Accounting Finance BA team. All right. So, hi, Chris. It's Ashley.
Oh, hi, Ashley.
Chris.
Oh, right. It could be
Oh, that's right. That's right. We have so many Chris's.
We have two Chris's in here today. All right. So if there are no other questions, can you say what a BA is? Sorry, Pizza McGee. It is a business analyst. Oh, Chris Lawless. She's been super awesome in helping with T32s.
They're my jam.
I help Noah with T32, so you can take all the credit. Don't you know what a T32 is?
All right. All right, we're going to move on. We have no other questions about the process since we're all process masters now.
Yep, okay.
We can get the slides to change.
There we go. Jackie's got to move my slides for me, so it looks like I'm just sort of sitting here doing nothing. It's like I'm literally looking at her. Okay, so here is the payroll process we just talked about. So you've seen this, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly pop in the reports, the 8 reports we're going to talk about, and show you where it makes the most sense for you to use them in this process. And then, like I said, I'm not going to talk about each one in depth because after we go through the whole thing, we're going to stop and take a look at each report in detail. So, just a quick run through here. So the first one, okay, at the very beginning, Jackie hit on this a little bit, but the first report you'd really want to run sort of proactively. And you'll notice that the box is in red. So we did this color coding thing to kind of make it easy for everybody, including us, to know what we're talking about here. But the red boxes are kind of telling you, hey, this is something you probably want to take action on, because if you can fix something ahead of time, it's just less of a headache than you having to go back at the end of the process and say, put in a PAT transaction. So that's why that thing's in red, not to startle you, but it's something to remind you this is important. The funding end date report, just really quick, it's how you see the positions or appointments for which a portion of the paychecks may be charged to Suspense if you don't get on it and fix those things ahead of time. Okay, the next one. Okay, this is going to be the salary funding report. Jackie had broken out for you the difference between storing the funding information separately from storing the salary amounts. And the salary funding report is showing you that funding information. It's going to show you how this person, is set up to be funded. But as we know, that sometimes doesn't happen depending on things that happen. But that's our plan, and that's what you're going to see on that report. Okay, number 3, that's the salary projections report. That's going to project out what your salary and fringe benefits are until the earliest of the job end date, the funding end date, or the budget date. There's a lot more, as Jackie was saying, there's a whole webinar on that, so I'm not going to go through all that.
You can find it on ccinfo.unc.edu.
She wants you to listen to her webinar. Okay, and you notice those 2 were in yellow. So I mentioned that the yellow ones are good to look at. We're not trying to say those aren't important, but they're not as I have another red one popping up that is going to tell me, hey, I really want to probably look at this report, and if I see things that are wrong, I want to do something. So the current suspense charges report are going to show you all the charges currently that are posted to the suspense tables. So, or the suspense accounts. I shouldn't say tables, that's very techy. But the accounts, that's where it kind of drops it where when those plan chart fields aren't working out for you. Number 5, that's the UNC suspense analysis report. I cannot talk today. I'm sorry, folks. Tripping over my words. We're going to talk about these 2 reports, in more detail, like I was saying. It is kind of weird because you see current suspense charges, UNC suspense analysis report. What's the difference between those? We will go into that. One of the biggest differences you'll notice is one of them doesn't have the PAT transactions on them, which is the UNC version. But there are other differences we'll get into. Next one, a yellow box, the labor and expense report. That one is going to allow you to review the charges of your salary and fringe benefits in the current pay period, despite where you originally planned on charging it. So you get to see where it really hit. Next one, the review pending transactions report. What this is you're actually going in and you're sort of seeing where in the approval chain all your PAT transactions are. So you want to see, are they pending, are they approved, where do they happen to be? And it's only for the PAT transactions. And then finally, I told you we had a lot of reports. We're up to 8 now. The payroll accounting report. This is going to give you a complete history of all your payroll transactions for an employee going back to go live, which if you weren't here for that, that was in October of 2014. Seems like a million years ago now, but we've only been doing this for like 4 years. One thing I want to mention before we go on, 2 of these reports, the number 2, the salary funding report, and number 8, the payroll accounting report, those reports, for the finance folks, you actually would have to have the enhanced access to reporting. For those of you who have it, it's the SAS reports. You go to the financial reporting tab. So I didn't want to get everyone excited on campus about those 2 reports, and then you go in and you don't have access. You may be able to get access. You may not have it. You might want to check with somebody, but those are limited to those enhanced reporting users. So that's something I just wanted to make sure you knew up front.
All right. We have a couple of questions actually that have just come in. And I do want to highlight one other thing. We have these 8 reports. And Donnie asked if the reports are found in Connect Carolina or Infoport. So it's a mix. 4 of them are in Infoport and 4 of them are in Connect Carolina. We're going to talk about which ones are located where as we go forward. And Kathy asked what's required for that access. We're going to talk about that in just a minute as well. But I do want to mention the College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Medicine have their own reports as well. So if you're in arts and sciences or medicine, you may have access to more reports than the ones that we are talking about here. These are reports that are available campus-wide. So I just want to clarify that if you're in one of those 2 areas, you may be wondering why we're not talking about reports you use on the regular basis. All right, so let's do another quick poll. So when's the best time to run the funding end date notification report? Is it after you notice an error, at the beginning of each pay period, when paychecks are generated, or after charges are posted to suspense accounts? So I will go ahead and put the poll up for you guys to answer. And I'm going to share the percentages here so that you guys can see. Looks like overwhelmingly you guys think at the beginning of each pay period.
trendy answer.
It is a trendy answer. It is also the correct answer. At the beginning of each pay period, it's something you want to do proactively before the process starts for the pay period, so that you can move funding sources around as you need to keep them from hitting suspense. All right, so moving on. So now we're going to talk about when it's helpful to use each of the reports. And we're going to talk about access for just a minute. Chris mentioned that a couple of these reports are limited to those that have enhanced financial reporting access. So all of the reports are in Connect Carolina and Infoport. And the access is determined by your MOU lead or your HR officer. So if you think you need access to one of these reports, you'll need to work with either your MOU lead or your HR officer to get that access. Or it may be that they have folks in your area that already have that access and can give you the report that you need. All right, so now let's talk a little more in depth. The funding end date notification report. So we just talked about and asked a question, and the best time to run this report is at the beginning of a pay period, and it lets you see the positions or appointments for which a portion may be charged to suspense. And that'll show you, because of the project's ending, or it has an expired or inactive chart field string, or there's no funding assigned. You notice we left it in red here. It's an action report. So if you have stuff going to suspense, you want to move that so that it doesn't happen. And the path is in that blue box down at the bottom. This is a Connect Carolina report. So all of the Connect Carolina reports are going to be in a light blue shaded box. The Infoport reports are in a tan box, but this is a Connect Carolina one. And the path for that is HR payroll menu, payroll accounting reports, funding end date notification. And there is information on CC Info as well about running these reports and the information and the filters to use and that sort of thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end.
All right, so report number 2 in the process is going to be the salary funding report. And this, when you run this report, you're going to see how your base and supplemental pay is planned to be charged. So that's the plan. We know that might not happen, but if everything goes fine, this is how we plan it to happen. But you got to keep in mind what it does not include. So it's not going to include your lump sum payments. It's not going to include your overtime, and it is not going to include your PAT transactions. So that's important to know, that you're going to be missing all that. As Jackie was saying, we have the beautifully color-coded boxes with the path, and this is the tannish one. So that tells me it's an Infoport. Now, whether you're on HR or finance kind of determines which path you use. Maybe some of you have both, but you can see the top one is for HR. So you would go in Infoport, you would click on the HR button, you'd go to payroll, and then you would go to salary funding. Whereas if you're a finance person, you would go to the finance button, start there, go into financial reporting, which is, it starts bringing up the SAS screen and all that good stuff. And then you would go to the salary funding report.
All right. So the next report, salary projections report. So again, you're running this report to see how it's projected to be paid in the future. Keeping in mind that this is an estimate of future expenses, and it's based on the earliest of the job end date, funding end date, or budget end date. And a big thing for the salary projections report is it doesn't include temporary employees, so employees that are paid hourly that have to clock in and out or swipe in and out, that sort of thing. It also does not include PAT transactions. So this report is looking into the future, and PAT transactions are changing historical payroll expenses. So just keep that in mind. Again, we have a tan box, which means it's an Infoport. And so this is on the HR side. So it's HR, and then the payroll tab, and then salary projections to get to this report.
All right, it's me again. You might be picking up that we're alternating these, and I'm the even reports. So that's how I remember it. Number 4, you can see it's in red, so we know it's really important. We want to take a look at this. It's the current suspense charges report. So if despite all your planning at the beginning of the process, you do have some charges that go to suspense, that's the report you want to look at. You're going to look at this and you're going to see all the current transactions that have gone to your suspense accounts. And this is an action item. You want to take action and get those things off the suspense accounts. It's going to include all your payroll transactions and your PAT transactions. So you'll notice that we keep saying this one includes them, this one doesn't. So, from report to report to report, you really kind of have to either watch this webinar again, or we're going to actually have the slides posted so you can go back and make sure you know what things are including what. Down at the bottom, you'll notice that we have the light shade blue box. So we're going back to Connect Carolina with this one. So in Connect Carolina, you're going to go through your menus, and you're going to go through like main menu, your HR/payroll menu, your payroll accounting adjustment tool, which is PAT, and then current suspense charges. So you got to go down a couple levels to find it, but that's where it is.
All right. I'm actually going to move back to the salary projections report for just a second. Karen asked a question and said, am I correct that this report will not include students as well? Yes, that is correct for SHRA students. EHRA student employees are included in projections unless they're on short work break. I hope that answers your question, Karen. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all answer because of the difference between EHRA and SHRA. All right, so moving back on, Chris just talked about the current suspense charges, and now I'm going to talk about the UNC suspense analysis report. So you would run this report to see why the payroll transactions have been posted to the departmental suspense accounts. And you see there that the details include the chart field string that's in error, the funding end date, and the number of days that the charge has been in suspense. One important difference between suspense analysis and the current suspense charges is that UNC suspense analysis only includes payroll transactions. It does not include PAT transactions. And this is also in Connect Carolina. It's a light blue box there. So main menu, HR payroll menu, payroll accounting reports, UNC suspense analysis. And before we move on, Vicki has asked a question, does the suspense report include benefits that have posted to suspense? And Vicki, I'm getting a head nod from Chris Lawless. So yes, it does include the benefits that have posted to suspense. And that is for both of them? Both reports?
Should be.
It should be for both of them. All right.
All right, it's Chris again. So we're going to talk about the labor and expense report. So you're going to run this report when you want to review the charges of salary and fringe benefits from an HR point of view. It's going to show you where a pay period is currently charged, regardless of where it was originally charged. So that meaning that it's going to show what it actually charged to, whether you planned it that way or not. It's going to show you actually where it went. So that's sort of an important point to know. Another important point is it doesn't show history. We're only looking at the current pay period. And, as we said before, it's a tan box, so we're switching back to InfoPort again. Sorry to keep doing that to you, but that's how it is in this world. And it's an HR report. You would go to payroll, and then you would go to PAT.
All right. So we're getting close to the end. Second to last one is the review pending transactions report. And this is for PAT transactions. So you would run this report to check the approval status of all pending PAT transactions, just so you can know where they are in the process and that sort of thing. We are back into Connect Carolina with this one. So you would find it under main menu, HR payroll menu, payroll accounting adjustment tool, and review pending transactions. So again, even though it's not in the name, review pending transactions is only for PAT transactions.
Okay, number 8. So it's me again. This is the last report in the process. This is the payroll accounting report. Just to remind you again, this is one of those reports that I talked about that's only for the enhanced users. So if you don't have access to the report, this isn't going to really totally help you. But for those of you who do, you're going to run this report to see a complete history of payroll transactions for an employee or chart field string. You know, that last one I talked about, the labor expense report, was only the current ones. This is going to go back to go live. I mentioned that before, back to go live in 2014. It's also going to include accounting information for you. Once again, this is an info port, so you can see at the bottom what the path is. That's going to be on the finance side under financial reporting, which, you know, I always call that the SAS part, personnel, and then you're going to go to payroll accounting report.
All right. We have one more question before we move on. It was from Doris, and it said, does it include cost code 1? Doris, are you talking about the suspense report? Labor and expense is what Chris Lawless thinks you're talking about. If you could just chime in and let us know. I didn't catch when that question came in. So labor and expense. Okay, so does labor expense include cost code 1? Crystal is nodding this time. So that's a yes. The labor and expense report does include cost code 1. All right.
Okay, so it's question time again. So, you know, here's a multiple choice for you. Which report, you know, the reports we just went over, shows you how base and supplemental salary was planned to be charged? Is it A, the salary funding report, B, the payroll accounting report, C, the labor expense report, or D, the funding end date notification report?
All right.
Jackie's
Put
bringing
up
up
the poll.
Yep.
I'm going to share the percentage so you guys can see where we're at. We'll give it another couple of seconds. We've still got some votes coming in.
Yes, people are still.
It's tricky. A lot of these reports have very similar names.
See, I had a couple of days to study this. Otherwise, I get confused too. So don't feel bad if you're getting confused with the jargon. All right. Well, I think we pretty much have a winner here. That's going to be A, the salary funding report. 95% of you decided that was the one, and it is.
All right. So the salary funding report does show you the plan. Let's do another one.
All right. Here's another question for you. Which report shows you a complete history of the payroll transactions, including the PAT transactions? So complete history, that's a little hint for you. That's what defines it. Is it the salary funding report, the payroll accounting report, the labor expense report, or the review pending transactions report?
So we're going to put up the poll. Share the percentages here of where we're at.
Still guessing. Okay, it looks like you about stopped. It is indeed the payroll accounting report. I noticed that a lot of people, not a lot, but some people, the next best guess was the labor expense report, and that would be the next best guess, but it doesn't have the complete history. It only has the current. So those two, I often will get confused in my mind. So that's why the handouts that we're going to point you to at the end are going to be really valuable for you.
All right. All right, so next question. Which of these suspense report includes information about PAT transactions? So is it UNC suspense analysis or the current suspense charges report? So I'll put that up there. Go ahead and share the percentage there. See a couple more people voting. Looks about 80-20, with 80% saying current suspense charges report. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it. It is, in fact, the current suspense charges report. That is the one that does show the PAT transactions as well. And we have one more. True or false? The review pending transactions report shows all payroll-related transactions that are waiting for approval. I'm going to open that up. So all payroll transactions that are waiting for approval. Is that true or false? It appears to have been a little more tricky. All right, we'll give it just another second. We've got 76% people that think false. It is in fact false. The review pending transactions report is for PAT transactions. All right, great job, everyone.
All right, so just to wrap up, here's our three things we wanted to talk about today. So how the payroll funding process works, where in the process the reports pull the information, and 3, when it's helpful to use each report. So hopefully throughout this webinar, we covered all those things for you and you understand the 3 things we were trying to convey. All right, so if you want more information, obviously we went through lots of stuff, lots of diagrams. There's going to be lots of different training for it, webinars and stuff. So the place you want to start is CC Info, and that's also where we're going to end up posting this webinar. So if you haven't gone to CC Info before, you really should go out there. It's pretty much anything that you have questions about with regards to training, webinars, CBTs, things you heard in class, anything like that. It's going to be out there. So for some of the things, we have training guides out there with step-by-step instructions. Some of you may have seen the finance and HR reporting guides. When you go out there, it's a big, long list of all the reports from the HR and finance sides. And it's actually a nice table because you can see the report, see what it does, and it has links to the training. There's also online trainings for PAT. So if you are somebody who does PAT and maybe you have some questions that sort of popped into your head, you can go view a video. There's like 2 or 3 videos out there, I think, that are PAT related. You can also register for our InfoPort finance and HR classes. If you're not comfortable with InfoPort, but you already have it, you can come to class and we'll show you how to work that. And then, like I said, some of the recorded webinars will be out there that you can go back and look at. One thing that I did want to point out that sometimes, I kind of found this out myself, is when you go to search for the reports, some of these reports are actually covered in the PAT guide itself. So for instance, like the labor expense report, that's going to be in the PAT guide. So I would highly recommend getting the PAT guide because I think there's like 3 reports that are actually covered just in that guide. Then there are some standalone trainings that if like you put in, all right, I want to find the funding end date notification report, that's its own separate training document. So sorry to be confusing, but when we kind of release these, they kind of sometimes get grouped together into books and sometimes they're standalone. But everything we've gone over is actually out there on CC Info.
Yeah, and those reporting guides that Chris mentioned, the big long lists of reports, it does have what guide, if there is any documentation about the report, what guide that documentation is in. So I know like some of them are in the InfoPort, financial reporting for InfoPort guide as well.
Right.
All right. So that's it. That's all we've got. So now it's time to put the BAs to the test. So I've gotten a couple of questions so far. The first one was, would we be sending out the slides? So the slides will be on CC Info when the webinar goes up as well. So just look for that later. And then Suzanne had a question. Hi, Suzanne. In regards to special pay, is there a way to have it charged to a different chart field string than their regular pay? In the instance of individuals who are over the salary cap for grants and contracts, this proves challenging. So that is not a Jackie question.
Come on, Jackie.
So I assume when you're talking about special pay, you're talking about lump sums, effort-related lump sums. If so, the lump sums don't feed into the regular appointment and position funding sources. So if you do pay somebody an overload, it's not going to know to readjust the regular appointment chart field strings to increase the cost sharing. So you could either do it preventively by an EPAR, fund swap, or after the fact, you could do a PAT action for it. Some things like clinical bonus pay are not effort worthy, so they don't matter in the grand scheme of cost sharing and salary cap. So I hope that answers that question.
She clarified and said anything that isn't certified as effort, like for example, overtime and a half.
Well, good thing is the salary cap shouldn't matter to anybody who gets paid overtime. Your overtime people, the hourly paid people, are not going to be even close to the salary cap. So that shouldn't matter. But things like overloads, summer salary, summer school, those kind of things, those would impact your overall UNC effort. So you'd need to do either the fund swap EPAR ahead of time to adjust for the cost sharing, or do a PAT after the fact.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. We have a question from Ashley. From what reports does the PI dashboard pull? Robin got the squeaky chair this morning.
It doesn't pull from any of the reports we've mentioned today necessarily, but the commitment accounting information that is included pulls from both department budget table to get their current salary funding sources and from the projections information to populate projections information in PI dashboard. That's where they pull from as far as commitment accounting pieces are concerned. But budget pulls from KK, pre-encumbrance and encumbrance pulls from commitment control, and the actuals pull from the general ledger.
So they all come from different places, but shouldn't necessarily. I mean, they should match up with these reports if you're looking at the same information. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ashley said, that's good to know because I know the dashboard does not include projections for temporary students. Right, and neither does the salary projections report. We don't project for temporary employees. And the only students that we project for are EHRA students who are not on short work break. Suzanne has another question. Is there a report that shows the dollars charged to sponsored projects that only include the earning codes that are certified in effort reporting? Ooh, that's a Chris question too.
So there's not really a report available that says, a reg is effort worthy, but an ATV for vacation payout is not effort worthy. OSR has the programming in ESERT to know which ones get brought into effort and which ones do not. But
and you can use the labor expense summary report to show charges on projects and the related earn codes that were used. It's just not going to filter out the ones that aren't effort worthy.
Right. But I will tell you that once the payroll is processed and including the PAT, all of those HR transactions, if they're effort worthy, they do load into ESERT. ESERT itself, there is a button that you can click on that shows you all of the dollars that got loaded onto an effort card. So there's that. That'll help you, like once it's paid, it'll show whether it got loaded to ESERT or not, whether it was effort worthy or not.
Then Ashley asked, doesn't the report in ESERT provide this? And actually, it looks like Suzanne answered that question. eCert does show the dollars certified, but as far as weeding out the dollars charged to the project that aren't certified, I can't find those.
Can you give me an example? I mean, most things that are not effort worthy wouldn't be sponsor project related, except things like vacation payout. You're talking about like the annual bonuses? Yeah, those are not effort worthy. Well, because they're not effort worthy, they also don't feed into the salary cap issue. And usually they're going to be minor enough that the cost sharing would be tiny. Yes, they are still charged to the project, just like a vacation payout could be. They just, and some grants may not allow the charges, but OSR could help you with those. Yeah, if you're ever in doubt, you can always contact the OSR group. They can look at the sponsor project contracts and see, is it an allowable cost? And if not, it's probably not allowable as cost sharing either.
Asia just chimed in and said bonus incentive wages are not part of the institutional base salary.
Correct.
All right, so we still have a couple of minutes. If anybody has any other questions? Suzanne said, how do I get those to not charge to the project?
If it's the behind the scenes annual increases, bonuses, there's no way to prevent them from hitting. Like Asia said, you'd have to pat them off after the fact.
Didn't realize pat was a verb. That's awesome. I love that, Asia.
Yes, it is.
You have to pat them off. All right. Any other questions about the reports? Everybody feel like a master now? Everyone's going to go out and run these reports. I'm not seeing anything coming in.
That's 7 minutes. You got all the experts in the room.
Oh, there are no stupid questions, Ashley. Where can I find a breakdown of these terms? Which terms? Like all the ones that we've covered, or? The different types of payments.
So like the break, like what does a 3-letter earn code mean? Like that?
Searching CC, but I'm getting many results.
So if you're talking about trying to find descriptions of earn codes or accounts or anything like that, in InfoPort, there is a tools icon. If you click on the tools, there's a link in there that will show you different department numbers, funds, sources, earn codes, that kind of thing. It'll only let you look at up to 100 at a time, but it's a great resource. I'll send you a link after. Yeah, so that tools in InfoPort does one of the breakdowns is earn codes.
But the labor expense summary report, when it shows you the fund and the charges on each employee, it has the earn code on it. That's the only one we have with earn code.
And that was in response to Suzanne's question.
Yes.
Do any of these reports include earning codes? I'm actually just doing it for the recording. Since the chat doesn't show on the recording.
Yeah.
So, yes. All right.
5 more minutes, guys.
Can you repeat that?
The labor expense summary report does include the earn code along with the charges for each employee.
Okay. Was that a little bit better? Okay, great. She said thank you. All right. So I don't see anything else coming in. So thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have further questions, you can reach out. If you need help, help.unc.edu is your best option, or 962-HELP. If you have general questions, you can reach out to us at cc_communications@UNC. Or if you have training questions about registering for a training for finance or HR, or need to cancel a training, connectcarolina_training@unc.edu. And also, if you don't already receive our newsletter, we have a monthly newsletter. You can subscribe to that. If you go to CC Info at the bottom, there's a place to subscribe to the newsletter. So if you don't have any other questions, thanks everyone for joining us, and be on the lookout later today or tomorrow for the recording of this webinar on ccinfo.unc.edu.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.